seconds, and then we have a group of about 8 people, or it looks like 11 people. I think it might be worth it to quickly introduce ourselves, just so we know where people are coming from. Hello, hello. Great. Let's start. I think it's pretty short, and it's a good small group. Could be a good conversation. I'm David. I guess you just met me in this larger conversation. And Jeff, you want to introduce yourself? I'll just go in the order I see on my screen. I don't know if people have the same order on their screen or not, but.
Yes, hi, I'm Jeff Poten. I teach at the School of International and Public Affairs, and I'm a former US EPA and USDA official.
Next person I see is Kritika. Is that how you say your name?
Yeah, that's right. I'm Kritika Kothari, and I'm working as a postdoc here at the University of Kentucky. And I'm working on the AgMIP soybean project, so running multiple soybean models and checking their uncertainty.
Very good to meet you. And next I've got Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a new postdoc at the Earth Institute at Columbia University, and I'm a plant scientist, and my work focuses on the role of new biotechnology in developing sustainable agriculture systems.
New postdoc must mean you just got your doctorate, so congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very exciting. And Kritika, you too, congratulations. And let's see, I see Sally. People have met you, but you want to just say hello?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sally, research associate at Center Global Energy Policy, Columbia University. It's very nice to see you guys here in this breakout session.
And thanks for that great presentation, Sally. Really doing great research here. Carlos Fuller.
Hi, good day, everyone. My name is Carlos Fuller. I am at the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize, and I follow the climate change negotiations. In fact, the lead negotiator for the Alliance of Small Island States, and really pushing for these enhanced NDCs this year, not next year.
Oh, fantastic, Carlos. We should touch base. Let's share email addresses in the chat. I'd love to be in touch with you about this, because I really want to increase the campaigning that's going on about this. Kelly Witkowski, are you with us?
I am. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Witkowski, and I am leading the Climate Change and Natural Resource Program at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, which we support the 34 countries of the Americas in the agricultural sector, and we are doing refocusing our strategy on supporting the countries to implement the agricultural components of the NDCs and to make sure the agricultural sector has a stronger role in the versions moving forward.
Oh, fantastic. Same in terms of cooperating. I hope we can get a network going here. The next person I've got is AV Tech. Is that Keo? Are you actually a tech, or are you joining us here?
I'm just recording this session.
Okay, great. Thank you for doing that. Naomi.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Naomi Fukagawa, who's the director of the USDA Agricultural Research Center, Beltsville Human Nutrition Research Center. Sorry.
Thank you for
I'm an odd duck in that I'm not a modeler or anything like that, but I'm at the end of the actual implementation and consumer care of patients, and we manage the USDA food composition data systems.
By the way, I'm not a modeler either, so I'm with you. Kathryn.
Hi, I'm Kathryn L. I'm part of the AgMIP staff here at the Center for Climate Systems Research at Columbia.
Thank you. And Gabriel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabriel. I'm a researcher for the South African Parliament. I recently joined them. I was a modeler. I support a committee that deals with land reform, environment, minerals, and energy.
Thank you for joining. Gyami.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gyami Shrestha. I'm the director of the U.S. Carbon Cycle Science Program Office. at the USGCRP, and I'm not a modeler either.
Yeah.
I'm listening with keen interest.
Great. And did I get everybody? Hector?
Hello everyone, my name is Hector Camargo. I am a PhD student in the University of Birmingham, and I work with LPG gas in agriculture in general.
Thank you. And let's see. Thomas, we were just going around introducing ourselves. Would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe unmute. Well, this really great group. Thanks everybody for joining. Any thoughts coming off the presentations or anything anybody would like to share about their work before we get into these specific questions that we were asked? I guess the question that seems most relevant that was asked is, you know, for our group is what policies are lagging, which is the second question that was posed. And I wonder if anybody has thoughts or views about what policies are lagging and what we could do about it.
Hi, something that I've just found in policy. So my work, like I mentioned, is a lot about plant trait development, but that a lot of the policy recommendations, et cetera, the rhetoric is very vague and broad, and that there's a disconnect between what the policy recommendation is and what actually happens in practice. And that's what my work is focusing on, and not necessarily in these exact scenarios, but I think it's something that happens across the whole food system is, you know, you cited the things that said like promote climate smart agriculture or encourage something. And I think we're lacking actual ways to do it. And that would be helpful. And I think it's lagging behind the science maybe in that sense. I don't know.
That's very interesting. Do you have, I totally agree about it. Do you have suggestions about ways to be more specific or ways to get these ideas implemented in more concrete fashion?
Oh, sorry. Well, I can tell you that the plan for my work is to include lots of stakeholders early on and discuss, you know, how to actually, how recommendation would be useful to them and what they do. That's my strategy anyway.
I hate to be cynical, but I think it may be here in the United States, it may be stating the obvious that many climate-related policy options are lacking at this point. What I'm most interested in exploring would be once various policy scenarios are articulated, to be able to actually profile what are not only the carbon reduction benefits, but also the array of co-benefits that we've been talking about all day today, nutrition and biodiversity, on and on. And if we had some modeling capability to not only look at the carbon impact of various scenarios, but also the co-benefit impacts, we could come up with some very robust models that might actually help to facilitate policy action.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that type of modeling capability exists now or what it would take to get there. Does anyone have any experience with that? You kind of need some multi-dimensional models, I guess, that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's exactly the way that AgMIP in part is going. We, in a project, actually this will be of interest to you, Carlos, a Green Climate Fund project that we have for the Caribbean that will hopefully start next year. We've included actually work with AgMIP on these multidimensional trade-offs across different variables. And so they're not perfect. And you know, a lot of it obviously depends on the data availability, which is another huge challenge that I think links into some of the policy weaknesses, but the methods that AgMIP is developing, combining the climate, biophysical, and economic models are really useful for this, and particularly the trade-off analysis model that is out of Oregon State University. And so So I'd say yes, but you know, for me, this is sorry for jumping the gun here, but we need to think about ways to build capacity in different countries to be able to evaluate this kind of in a more fluid manner. Because, for instance, we've been wanting to do this for years in Latin America. We haven't had the funding. We haven't found the funding to do it, and it's very much needed to inform policy ex ante so that we know, which measures to incentivize, and what are the trade-offs, especially in agriculture, as someone just mentioned, understanding, and so that we can make the case. Because in my perspective, pretty much a lot of different policies coming out of water, health, even tourism affect the agricultural sector. And so, just looking at agricultural sectoral policies in and of itself is not enough. We need these multidimensional, intersectoral kind of initiatives that look across landscapes and these different trade-offs and synergies between different goals. And I think that's where a lot of policy is specifically lacking. Working in the ag sector, a lot of it is just focused on productivity and competitiveness, and it's just not enough, obviously, over the long term.
Very interesting.
Thanks for that, Kelly. And in fact, that's one of the issues I think we really need to address within the Caribbean. And that is in our NDCs, yes, we speak a lot about the climate smart agriculture aspects of it, adaptation. And then whenever we go to the international circuit, it seems it is more mitigation centric, but our developing countries we have not seen, or it's not explicit enough, the economic benefits to agriculture of the mitigation aspects of it. And so I think we need to promote that much more so that governments will take the proper policy actions to address both adaptation and mitigation within the agricultural sector.
I was recently hearing about how Central American migration pressures to the United States are driven substantially by, or very significantly by, climate change. Is that your view also, Carlos?
Yes, in fact, we've had some really severe droughts in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, northern Belize, southern Mexico, that area, and that is where, the land is just not productive enough to maintain systems, and people are just migrating northwards, seeking better opportunities. So it is an economic move driven by climate change.
Yeah. Other thoughts about what policies are lagging here? I think from my perspective, one of the most controversial areas are diet-related policies, and that touches people kind of right where they live, and encouraging people to eat less beef can provide, can provoke a real pushback, and I think it may vary from country to country and culture to culture, but I think that the data suggests that can improve human health and also cut greenhouse gas emissions, but people don't want to hear it, and I wonder if people have the same experience, in their work or in their lives.
David, yesterday when we were chatting, I mentioned that Chatham House had published a report about 3 or 4 years ago on how a switch to low meat diets would actually be a relatively cost-effective way for developing countries to establish and meet their NDCs. I couldn't find that report. I was attempting to find it today, but I found another Chatham House report, which I'll forward to you, that actually spoke to this issue, making the point that it may not be as much of a hurdle for countries to develop public relations and public education campaigns than is the popular perception. And their argument is that it's more doable than we might perceive it to be.
That's very interesting. I'd like to see that.
I think that's really controversial, because I think that is perhaps the case in much of the developed world. But in developing countries, livestock, for example, in Latin America and the Caribbean, provides some sort of income for over 60% of farmers. Yeah. And so we can't just look at the emissions footprint. We have to look at economic development, poverty reduction, and in many cases, actually, a lot of the rebuttals I've seen of the Eat Lancet kind of suggestions on a lower meat diet is that in these developing countries, obviously they're a fundamental part of nutrition and people are undernourished. And if we take this away, it's going to exacerbate the problem. So I think we have to be really careful about those kind of generalities and, the implications that they would have for developing economies and the poorer half of the population.
Yeah, by the way, I'm sorry, I don't want to give the wrong impression, because there's a substantial distinction between meat-based economies that really don't have alternatives or don't have cost-effective alternatives. But I think what we're seeing in many of the middle-income countries is not just the indigenous or the local sources of smallholder agriculture that's producing meat products, but also a tremendous effort on the part of the international food industry to develop markets for imported meat products. So I think it might be the latter part where there's more opportunity and you're not undermining the local economy as you're referring to.
And could I add, on that issue, in the Caribbean, amazingly, we are one of the most obese regions in the world. And it is because of more processed meat, food that we're consuming. And so that's an area, I think, if you look at the entire food cycle, as that first presentation I did at the plenary, we could look at, well, how do we look at emissions, both from the whole cycle, from production to consumption, and then also do that labeling that will address both the health, the agricultural emissions, and nutrition across all the sectors. So I think, yeah, looking at that holistically would be very important.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned that it really hits close to home when you start telling people that they need to change what they're eating. And it's just a perception that I've had, but I did my PhD in the UK and I've just moved back to the US to be at Columbia. And by the time I left the UK, really quickly, within the few years that I was there was a rapid shift to everyone that I knew trying to be flexitarian, reducing their meat consumption. And it was almost uncool if you were not trying to reduce your meat consumption. And I definitely have not had that feeling yet here. I think the US seems to be lagging behind in that sense. And I'm interested in what everyone else thinks, but I think it's the same. I felt like they were a bit ahead with plastic straws and everything too. It was, there was a sense of like looking out at what everyone else is doing, and it became a good thing that you watched all your friends doing something environmentally friendly. And I'm wondering, what, if anyone knows what that trigger is that makes it socially acceptable that hasn't happened here yet.
Just to add on what everyone has been saying, based on the work that I did when I was in Germany, I compared crop production versus livestock and rangelands for the northern parts of South Africa into Zimbabwe. And based on my work, we found that crop production is no longer viable, meaning you've got high risk under climate change conditions. And going into livestock and more rangeland is more viable. Based on what Carlos is saying in the Caribbean, that the focus is more on adaptation. This is true for most of sub-Saharan Africa. The focus is more on adaptation and hoping that through adaptation efforts, we'll have spin-offs of mitigation. So I think when you make some of the suggestions that the shift to less or no meat consumption, it will be viable in certain areas and not viable in other areas. So I believe a site-specific or location-specific policies are important, and within a country or within a region, those policies will vary from area to area.
This is Naomi Fukagawa. So I will speak from the human health perspective, in that really the data that we have to necessarily relate a specific food component or type of food or food category to health is really not as well established as people would like it to be. And that's because of the fact that exposures to food is really not exposures to one particular element in the food or a nutrient, but really the entire plate that one consumes. And unfortunately, then connecting the data we have about human health and physiological responses, most of the data we have are from people that have already developed non-communicable diseases that may be diet related. So in terms of trying to figure out whether or not we can have a generalized policy to impact health of individuals is, I think, a really big challenge. And as Kelly and some of the others have been speaking to, that it's not obviously one size fits all for all countries, and it does have to be specific. And we have to shift away, personally, I think, from trying to demonize certain types of foods because of the impact it has on Earth, but really trying to figure out how do we find those trigger points in people who are going to make those choices, as Sarah had mentioned. I don't know what that trigger point is, but there can be a lot of pushback if they're told, especially from governments, that they should adhere to a particular pattern, when we really don't have very strong evidence of which pattern is optimal, because, we have many gaps in our research repertoire. It's my personal opinion, not that of the US government.
I want to expand on that just from personal experience, and that is that I've been seeing a lot of these meat alternative products, which are gaining a lot of excitement, especially among the vegan and vegetarian communities. And I wonder about whether those products contain the array of micronutrients that may exist in meat products. And I have the same concern about urban agriculture, greens rather grown indoors with chemical mixtures, as opposed to in a soil-based environment, especially given that we're learning only in recent years about the importance of soil microbiology and the vast array of micronutrients that are available in healthy soils that may not be available in those indoor agricultural environments. So I support very much what the previous person had mentioned, that there's no clear-cut answer about what is the best nutritional option.
I agree, and that's where one has to decide, what do we mean by something being processed? Or, what are the trade-offs if you were to have generation of laboratory-based meat products, or products that may be ideal because it's plant-based, but in the efforts to get it to be produced, we may be creating additional impacts on the environment. So I don't know how to achieve the balance, but I think that's where we have to head. Or I hope we could head in that direction.
Do you think it's possible to make any type of statements confidently about diet and their relationship to health? And in developed country like the United States, cutting back on sugar intake, for example, that would seem like that's a pretty clear example of public health benefits if we could do that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think sugar intake is certainly something, but you remember how we went down the path, 20 or 30 years ago, that fat was bad, right? And that was, at the point where we were sitting, and in a sense, because we weren't at the age of really having a lot of open data, and our journals tend to be biased against publishing things they're just statistically significant, that we run into the problem really of reinventing the wheel in terms of some of the sciences that we're doing. And so I think now we're in an age where data is so open that we should be able to come, and especially using the modeling experience and big data experience that people have, to think out of the box and not in a sort of linear relationship manner, but just the mixture of everything to try to come out and associate it to health outcomes. But everybody's exposed to food, and whatever is in food. So therefore it's not quite like doing studies for pharmaceuticals where
Right.
you don't. And so that's the challenge that we have. I mean, do we consider sugar or glucose sort of the added sugar sort of like a, you know, excessive amount of a drug when really, you know, everything breaks down to glucose, you know, eventually that's what your cells want. So, you know, that's the, I think the balance, you know, what is, you know, how do we even measure what's added sugars in a food? Because we know the declaration on labels. And I think you brought that up in terms of, you know, potentially having some warning signs on packages that are you know, not only environmentally friendly, but in terms of health. But how do we get that kind of thing through our systems at the present time? I'm not really sure. I think that's the challenge.
Well, thank you. It looks like we're being summoned back to the main session. I don't know if people see this in the chat, but you open up the chat, there's a link to go back to the main session. So I guess that's what we should all do. And
Okay, well,
I'll see you there, everybody. It's great talking. Great to meet, you know,
yeah.
all of you. Really enjoyed this.